Hello Crowsomaniacs. You'll see behind me we are at another really good and easy to guess secret European location. Now, subject of this video, I think you've already guessed from that little sneak peek at the book on the table in front of me. This is the official blog launch video to announce the release of a book that Steve Jabber and I have been working on for, let's see, we started work in February. It is now September, so we've been beavering away for, let's see, quick maths, almost 7 months. And this is actually the second edition of a book Steve originally wrote last year, so there's been a lot of work gone into this, as I think you'll see when we flick through it at the end of this video. So rather than me run my mouth about too much about what I've done straight off, let's talk to the main author, Steve himself, where he'll talk a lot about the first edition and why we got involved in the second.
Okay, so I first wrote this book, Primal Seduction, about a year ago, and I gave it my best shot at that time, but I think it's difficult to download your own brain and accurately transcribe what's in there. So I gave it a damn good shot, but Nick came to me after about 9 months after having released it and said, look, there's so much extra we could say here, and there's so much more detail that we could go into. So we sat down for about 11 or 12 hours going through my method, my mindset, and basically just downloaded it all into the new book. It then went through a very lengthy editing process and blah blah blah, and now I can honestly say, having seen the book and actually fucking read the thing, that I'm very proud of it. I think it's a much better book than it originally was, and I think you're going to love it, and you should read it because I have a lot of interesting stuff to say.
Okay, so most of my viewers, blog readers looking at this video, will be aware of Steve. They know who he is, and that will pretty much answer the question of like, why Steve? Why did I get involved with Steve for this book? However, for those of you who aren't familiar with Steve, I'll just tell you a little bit about why I wanted to do a book with him. Now, when I first got involved in the community in 2009, I used to go on the local London Seduction Society forum. So it's the equivalent of just a normal pickup forum, but it was localised to London, like very much the London scene. And there's a lot of names on the London forum. There's a lot of guys who are VIP members, 5-star members, everyone seemed to lick their arse, stuff like that. And coming into it new, I didn't know who was who. So after a while things started to fit into place, and there were certain names going around there who had street cred, as it were. One name who was quite legendary was Steve Jabber. Now, I didn't know who Steve was at this point. I wouldn't meet him for another couple of years, but the consensus of the board was that nobody in London was fucking girls like Steve could fuck them. They'd say stuff like, oh yeah, he just like walked into this club, started talking to a girl, and she went absolutely mental, loved it, followed him around the club, and he took her home, banged her. Guys would be like, oh, was she hot? They'd say like, yeah, hottest girl in the club. So stuff like that. Like initially, actually, the Steve Jabber stories, initially I didn't believe them, although I've since seen them with my own eyes. So I sort of knew about Steve then, and then in, I think it was 2012, late 2012, Steve, who'd been out in, I think it was Bulgaria or something, living over there, had come back to London, and he sent a message around, like a private message around the London Seduction Society people, basically saying, right lads, I want a social circle. There was like 5 people in the message. He's like, you guys don't seem like cunts, like why don't we go out and have a curry? So I went out for the curry, and that's where I met Steve. So we hit it off, we became friends, we ended up travelling a lot together. We've we lived in the same house share in Shadow Hampstead for like nearly a year. So I actually got to see Steve in person, both as a normal guy hanging around in his boxer shorts eating his breakfast, and in nightclubs picking up girls. I got to see the girls he brought home, I got to see the girls he dated, and of course we spent a lot of time just hanging out talking, you know. So I started to absorb Steve's mindset. I started through seeing him like nearly every day for a couple of years. I got to really understand who he is, how he thinks, how he reacts to things, and just see what his reality is like. So obviously the girls is the bit that's going to interest you. So we've been on holidays where he's just like looked around the club, basically pointed at the hottest girl, says, right, I'm going to have her, and then like an hour or two later he's got her, right? So in the beginning it was like Jedi mind tricks, as I couldn't figure out what he was doing. Like, I guarantee that if you were just to follow Steve around a nightclub without talking to him and just watch him, you'd learn next to nothing, because so much of what he does is like very, very subtle. You have to actually know what you're looking for. Now, Steve's quite a self-reflective guy. He could probably tell you 50% of what he does. He could actually explain 50% of what he's doing. Like, look, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, and I think it's ready for me to do this bit now. So he can explain it. But there's another 50% which is so ingrained into his view of the world, it's kind of like the lenses he wears or the structure of his mind, that even he can't explain what he's doing. It's like instinctive. So when I was watching him do stuff, I'd say, look, Steve, like, were you doing like X, Y, Z? He'd be like, no mate, I wasn't, I was just like in the moment. And then the next day, you know, because he'd often think about these things, the next day he'd be like, oh Nick, I was thinking what you said last night, and yeah, I've realised I do that because there was another girl where I did X, Y, Z as well. So we realised that actually I was able to deconstruct a lot of the real subtextual level things that Steve was doing. And as my readers know, I have a tendency to create systems, to create step-by-step guides, to really deconstruct. So when I read Primal Seduction, I said to Steve, I was like, look, there's a lot going on here which is good, but you're doing a lot more than what's really coming out in the book. So why don't we really knock our heads together and basically allow me to deconstruct everything I can see that you do, everything I've learned over the last few years hanging around with you. I'll like deconstruct that. We can put it onto paper, we can draw it out into flowcharts, we can make little like bullet point lists, and then we'll talk through that, formulate it, and turn it into something you can teach from. Because this book is mostly about what Steve calls the 11 cornerstone characteristics of the attractive masculine man. Now that's mindsets. There's about 200 pages, and the book's 400 pages, there's about 200 pages of it, half of it, where Steve's talking about his mindsets. Now, those of you familiar with inner game products will know that most people, when they talk about mindsets, it's woolly. It's very power of now, it's very woolly. You're reading it, you think, yeah, but how do I actually turn this into banging birds? So what we've done in the mindsets chapter is we've actually broken it down into things that are useful for banging birds. Now, one way we did this is, like Steve said, we sat down over the course of a few days, came up with about 12 hours of audio footage where we went to each mindset, and then I interviewed Steve to try to draw these details out and point them onto different subjects so that he could then access parts of his mind which were previously, what you might say, he would just think they're so obvious he doesn't talk about it, but I'd like pull it out into the, essentially bring it out into the middle of the table, and then he would look at it and think, oh, actually I think this way, I think that way, oh yeah, this is a girl I met where I learned this thing. So that's all in the book. Right, so without further ado, let's actually look through the book. So here we go. Now, first thing you'll notice, that's big. That's a big book, right? That's 408 pages. Those of you who've got Mastery, Day Game Mastery, that's 458 pages. So this is basically the same size. The word count's actually the same. The difference in pages is just a layout issue. So it's a real hardback. Will look beautiful on your shelf. So now I'm going to take you through page by page. Right, stop it. So, Primal Seduction by Steve Jabber with Nick Krauser. Become the universally attractive man. Well, I think the message of that cover is quite clear. Dudes with money and status throwing their money at the women still don't get them because they're drawn magnetically to the power of Steve. Right, so what have we got? This is actually all on the preview on the Lulu page. You can actually see this back cover here. So what's actually in the book? Well, it's 3 parts. So part 1, the Primal Seduction manual. This is the core text. So Steve originally wrote this 2013, and we've now expanded it massively. I re-edited literally every single word. I went through from beginning to end, cleaning things up, adding my own examples and metaphors in, like saying to Steve, look, what are you trying to say in this bit, trying to make it clearer. So the whole text has been fully edited by me and also by 2 different copy editors. Then we get to the main new content, which is the interviews. This is, I'd say, about 70,000 words just of interviews, which is 12 hours of Steve and I going through the content of the book in more detail. Again, that's all after we transcribed it. I went through again editing it to clean it up, make it sound better, so it's not exactly word for word what was said. It's basically an edited version of the interviews. And the home study system, this is a 30-day action plan with specific advice for every day. There'll be like 1 topic of each day and then step-by-step list with missions. It's very practical. So let's have a look inside. Okay, so contents. We've split it into 4 books. So, book 1, context. That's laying out the meta level theories of what is game, why this book, why is this book different, and just high level. Okay, then we get into mindset. So you'll see here E1 to 6, those are the 6 essential cornerstone characteristics of a masculine man. And then we have 5 we might call supporting characteristics, also very important, but I wanted to prioritize this. So you can have a quick read of what those are. Now the purpose of this book in the mindset section is how you act around women. You're always going to be showing who you are, about who you believe you are, what you believe you're capable of, what your entitlement is, what sort of person you are. You can never hide that through your outer game. So mindset comes first. You have to make yourself think like a high value man. So that's what this is about. But of course, you still have to go out there and talk to the women, which is why we have book 3, the mechanics. Now this is what you might recognise more from typical game books of like literally how to open, how to deal with approach anxiety, how to do situational opens, when to do direct, when to do indirect, what to do in a nightclub. That's all in there. And then the action plan, that's for those of you who have just read, 323 pages, and you're going to be like, fuck me, there's a lot of information to digest there. I know myself, when I was first involved in game, it felt like I was trying to juggle 6 balls at the same time. There's so many things to concentrate on. There's like body language, eye contact, vocal tone, the opener, do you go indirect, do you go direct, there's like so much. So what we've done here is, you'll see from the daily plan, we've just picked 1 topic per day and gone into that in detail. So let's skip through. So you get the idea that this is there's a lot in here, right? This is one of the interview sections. Let's just do it fast from the back. So this is the action plan. You see there's actual missions there. So this is. So for example, we'll do a little bit of an online game there. Right, yes. So for example, day 12, so when you're getting dates, we've actually got Steve's main advice for a first date. So there's a lot of detail here in terms of theory, do this, do that as well. And then he's broken down into missions. So 4 actual things to try on the date. Right, we've got a lot of diagrams done. So this is part of the nightclub model that we're going to. So again, this is where you can kind of see my influence. So This isn't my content, this is all Steve's theory, but you can see like my mind is how I've taken what Steve knows and I've actually put it into the page into a systematized order. That's one of the big leaps from the original to this second edition. But don't get me wrong, this content's all Steve. It's all about channeling Steve, getting his mind onto the paper. There you go.